Ask you from your questions here. What the president's major role in American life? What kinds of things does he do that's so important? What makes the chief executive so immensely important in American life? Well, obviously, as we saw in Article 2, he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Right? Obviously, just the executive powers, very military kind of thing always. But he's also a head of state. Now, in a lot of countries, these two things are separate. Certainly in modern parliamentary countries, there might still be a monarchy. You know, Japan has its emperor, England has Queen Elizabeth. There's sort of a monarchy sort of line, and they're the head of state, right? They're the symbolic leader. And at one time they were also the commander-in-chief, but not anymore. What is today, say in England? You've got Queen Elizabeth. Does she execute Britain's wars and military operations? No, it's the Prime Minister. Yeah, right. In the United States, though, in the president, you have the head of state and the chief executive in one. And so he, as he commands the military, he also throws the first pitch at the World Series, right? He hangs out with celebrities and recognizes American talent, this sort of thing. There's Nixon and Elvis, right? He also sort of steps up in times of immense national tragedy. But you know what this picture's from? Reagan. This is from the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, remember, back in the 80s. And he gave this very beautiful speech on live television. It was this, special address from the president after the huge disaster when the space shuttle blew up on the way out to orbit. And so he sort of unifies the country together around, sort of gather around the flag kind of mentality when there's a huge catastrophe like this. So he's also head of state. What else does he do? Right, yeah, he's the chief legislator. He's involved in the legislative process, and we saw that the Article 2 requires him to submit legislation in his State of the Union address. And it has a lot to do with the way that he also guides the legislative process. He threatens to veto, or he says that he won't veto, he says he'll sign something, or he actually does veto it, right? So you think of, there's John F. Kennedy in the State of the Union address, sort of proposing his legislation, knowing full well that it might not pass. He's going to have to steer it through Congress. But it's all a matter of his persuasion, his ability to move legislation along. There's Lyndon Johnson signing, look who's standing behind him. What act do you think he's signing here?
Civil Rights?
Yeah, Civil Rights Act, 1964, and there's one right after that, 65. And of course that was Martin Luther King's big fight during the Civil Rights era, to try to get Congress to pass civil rights legislation and Johnson to sign it, which he did. And then of course there's the presidential veto. Here's George W. Bush vetoing the funding for embryonic stem cell research, his first veto, and I think one of his only vetoes, he only had 2 or 3 I think, in 2007. We will not give federal dollars, public dollars, to funding embryonic stem cell research. If private organizations want to do it, fine, but we're not going to use federal tax dollars for that sort of thing. What else does the president do? His roles in national life. He's also the manager of the economy, or the budget, I should say. Budget maker. It used to be that Congress would set up its budget and then try to just pass it through and then he would approve. And Congress is still involved in that. But now it's the other way around. The president gives a sort of proposed budget. Remember, President Obama just did this recently. Submits it to Congress and then they decide whether or not to approve it. And they tweak it and they adjust it and they divide up the line items and everything. But ultimately the president is the one that designs the budget, the one that sets it all up. What else does he do? Right, yeah, he manages the economy. This has a lot to do with social welfare programs, and one of the biggest ones that started back in the 1930s, and still with us today, not in good condition, but what is it? It's
Social Security.
Yeah, Social Security. Right, what is Social Security? It's just sort of a federal pension program for elderly people, so they can sort of put away some money out of their own salary. The federal government will hold it for them and then pay it back to them when they need it in their old age. What's happened to Social Security more recently? We've attached Medicare and Medicaid to it. We've attached all kinds of other social programs to it. We've diverted Social Security funds to a variety of other things, and Social Security is slowly starting to break. And your generation is wondering, where's our Social Security going to be? Right? And more and more people are learning to don't depend on Social Security, invest in other things. Right? And of course the Federal Reserve. What does the Fed do?
Does it take care of inflation rate?
Right.